about last week where he has played a little bit better. What a pass by Rondo.
That might be the dagger.
Why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league?
The Lakers repeat back-to-back titles. The LA Lakers, the 2010 NBA champions.
During the NBA Finals in the 2010s, as always, there were the winners and there were the not winners. Now, even if you were a not winner, you made it to the NBA Finals. That meant you were the champion of an entire conference. 9 times out of 10, that meant you were a good team. Hell, probably even a great one. That other one chance probably just meant you were a Cleveland team. Anyways, this video was highly requested, so today we're going to be ranking the runner-ups of the 2010s, the teams that just came up short in the NBA Finals. And this is still a really interesting conversation because a couple of these teams were just like one bounce away from actually being the champions of that year, so let's see how they stacked up against each other. Yep, number 10 will be the 2015 Cavaliers, as is the case in most of these type of rankings. This one just isn't rocket science. By the time they got to the finals, they were a shell of what they were supposed to be. Kevin Love didn't play past the first round. Kyrie Irving gets hurt in overtime of that game, so he doesn't even play all of game 1. And that just left LeBron James with a bunch of extremely hard workers against an extremely talented team. Now, don't get me wrong, they fought and they fought hard. Tristan Thompson, Dellavedova had to go to the hospital after a game because he damn near killed himself trying to chase Steph Curry around. Props for that. But when you look at NBA Finals teams, this is not a finals team. This is a team where if they had played a full season together, you're like, man, I hope LeBron James gets another star sometime soon. I hope he really gets a chance to compete for a title while he's here. And they still ended up eking out 2 games and they had a lead in that series. So while they did overachieve, while they did impress, on this list they are easily 10th and there really doesn't need to be any more justification here. Hey, who did not see this one coming? The 2018 Cavaliers, the evolution, the second form. The 2015 Cavaliers on steroids. So in looking which roster to place 10th, it really wasn't that difficult. The 2018 Cavaliers at least had Kevin Love. They had adequate shooters because that was one of the goals when they traded everybody away that spring when they turned over the entire roster. They at least gave LeBron something to work with while also trying to have younger guys just in case he was going to bolt that summer. They did accomplish that and it ended up mattering. You go look at the second round series against Toronto, that's where we officially dubbed it LeBronto, but Kevin Love in that series averaged 20 and 10. Kyle Korver was averaging like 14 points. Guys were knocking down their shots. Yeah, this team had a little bit more than just the hard workers that the 2015 Cavaliers had. Both of them feel very familiar to the 07 Cavaliers, but I think 18 Cleveland just edges out that 15 roster. The 2019 Warriors fall back this far because what do you even actually rank as the 2019 Warriors roster in the finals? There was a lot of in and out there. Kevon Looney is trying to play through like cracked ribs in an effort to make up for what DeMarcus Cousins was supposed to be by that time, which was a full starting 5. However, being that he tore his quad in the beginning of that year's playoffs, he was definitely not 100% by the time the finals came around. Klay Thompson misses a full game, then tears his ACL at the end of game 6. So there was one game there where basically all of Toronto was defending Steph Curry. Kevin Durant plays like 20 minutes then tears his Achilles. It's honestly crazy that this series even went 6 games and it was very nearly over in 5. People forget that. But yeah, almost based off the in and out and the injuries alone, the 2019 Warriors would definitely have to occupy the slots right before the Cavaliers. If they were healthy, of course you bump them way up, but they have a lot of competition on this list and crutches and bandages just aren't gonna cut it. The 2011 Heat did manage to make the NBA Finals. They managed to make quick work of the Bulls, who a lot of people thought were a more complete roster that year, and it was off sheer talent alone. This was Dwayne Wade's healthiest year as a part of this Miami Heat Big Three, and there was a point in that season where they were discussing Wade and LeBron as co-MVPs and how that would work. However, this is definitely not the best Heat team, and it is not the best runner-up. I really felt like this Heat team was suffering from the fact that they had brought 3 max guys together, and even after a couple of them took pay cuts, they still weren't able to fill out a really legitimate roster around them, and that's what improved as the years went on. So they bring in Ilgauskas that year, Mike Bibby, Eddie House. It really felt like the rest of that roster was just kind of filled out with spare change and finding whatever was left, and that was exposed once they got to the NBA Finals and they were able to write a defensive plan that actually worked. You couldn't do that in years later because the roster was able to adjust to a defensive plan that just tried to crowd players or fill the paint. Also, not to mention that LeBron James significantly improved his game after this series, and the Heat figured out roles in terms of whose team it was between him and Dwayne Wade. So yeah, while the 2011 Heat were definitely impressive, they made the finals, they won 2 games, they made pretty quick work of all the East series. I still think as far as finals teams, there was definitely a lot better built out teams than this. The 2012 Thunder were fire, especially in NBA 2K12 that year. The thing that people don't even remember is that they had a hell of a playoff run, especially for how young they were and especially for how fast they progressed. In the playoffs, they played the Mavericks, the Spurs, and the Lakers. So they defeat the first seed Spurs, and they defeat the last 2 Western Conference champions, who also at that point happened to be the last 2 NBA champions. Now, of course, it was not the same exact Mavericks team, but the Thunder handled it appropriately. They swept the Mavericks and they beat the Lakers 4-1, and then they beat the Spurs 4-2. It's just that when they got to the finals, they ran into a LeBron James and Miami Heat team that was significantly hungrier, also better. The Heat improved the roster, they got Shane Battier, filled some holes in the roster. LeBron James had a better game, and the Thunder, as you saw in the breakdown that I did months ago, they just had no clue what to do with LeBron. They had no defensive game plan for him. But also go back and study that series, because again, it ended in 5 games. It looks like quick work, when in reality 4 of those games were extremely close and could have went either way. However, the Thunder were not the deepest team, as once you got past Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, it could be difficult sometimes to find very strong contributions. And I think for a lot of these top 5 teams, their strength really comes from their depth. This 2010 Celtics team was the definition of deep, and that's why I have them in the top 5 and above some other teams where you might initially say, hey, there's more talent. But check it out, because you had your regular big 3, you had Ray Allen, KG, and Paul Pierce, but then you had Rondo, who in that year's playoffs really began to come into his own as one of the league's best point guards. So you have those 4. Outside of those 4, you had Kendrick Perkins, who was definitely doing his part on defense, Rasheed Wallace coming off the bench, Nate Robinson, Glenn Davis, and Tony Allen. So in the playoffs that year, they had a very strong 8-man rotation, and Nate Robinson and Glenn Davis even led the way in a finals game, or at least momentum wise. That deep rotation on top of the big 3 is part of the reason they were able to be such shockers in the playoffs, because during the regular season, when they were just trying to survive basically and deal with injuries, it seemed they'd really fallen off. Then you put them in the playoffs and tell a team like the Cavaliers led by LeBron James you have to beat them 4 times. That was just undoable. Those other rosters just weren't as good. They weren't as deep. They gave the Lakers hell in that 7-game series. Without Kendrick Perkins tearing his ACL, they very well may have been champions. So between that mixture of defense, depth, and talent, I definitely think they qualify for a top 5 roster in the runner-up spot. 2014 Miami gets my 4th spot, and definitely better than the 2011 roster. You have LeBron James, who again played at an MVP level that year. They pretty much have the same roster as the 2013 Heat. The only difference is that Dwayne Wade slowed down even more. This is where his knee was really starting to become a problem, and by the time they got to the finals, that's really where the wheels had completely fallen off. But yes, based off of talent alone and the fact that this was basically the 2013 Miami Heat with a little bit older Dwayne Wade, yeah, I feel very comfortable giving them the 4th spot here. It really feels like the San Antonio Spurs were the only team in that year's playoffs that were equipped to take them apart the way that they did. Man, people really do not remember the 2017 Cavaliers at all. They were completely taking apart teams up until they faced the Golden State Warriors. They'd only lost 1 game, and that was to the Celtics in the East Finals. But other than that, I think that was the year where the Cavaliers most looked like the big 3 that we expected. LeBron was averaging 32 points, Kyrie Irving 25, Kevin Love 16. That was about the breakdown that we really expected from them in each playoffs that of course we really didn't get. And then they had multiple shooters who were knocking down their shots surrounding them. They were so good on that side, in fact, that they actually led the playoffs in offensive rating. They were above the Golden State Warriors. Now, of course, once you get to the NBA Finals, the fact that they weren't as great defensively, that really came back to hurt them. They were better on that side than they were in the regular season, but there really wasn't any amount that was going to help them defeat the Kevin Durant Warriors team. However, the 17 Cavs might have been able to beat almost any other team in that year's playoff bracket. In another universe, the 2013 Spurs are actually champions. It's almost unfair that they're even on the runner-up list because they were that close to winning it in 2013. Nevertheless, what happened, so they are runner-ups, but that team was damn good. They were so good, in fact, that the team that they were about to beat for that year's title was the 66-win Miami Heat. The Miami Heat with the should-have-been unanimous MVP LeBron James. That was the team that they actually led that entire final series up until they lost Game 6. That team was also 4th in points and 1st in assists throughout the regular season, so the only thing that really separated this team from the 2014 Spurs was hunger. To be honest, everything else was pretty consistent. As a matter of fact, if they would have won that year, they would have been on the list of champions this year and they would have been pretty high. Honestly, they would have probably been second just like they are here. And as always, the 16 Warriors, yes. Oh my goodness, the 73-9 Warriors on a runner-up list. If that does not tell you how weird this decade has been. But yes, there were circumstances in the 2016 finals. What happened happened. But yeah, I still think that if there were no suspensions and there were no injuries, the Golden State Warriors still end up winning the title that year. Therefore, I'm not going to look at this and just say, oh, they lost, so now they should be like 2nd or 3rd on this list. No. Still had unanimous MVP Curry. You had Draymond in probably what was his best year. The team had pristine ball movement. They were ending teams in like 3 quarters, so Steph wasn't even playing the 4th and he still put up those crazy stats. They were supreme defensively as well, and get this. The 2016 Warriors were 1st in points, 2nd in blocks, 1st in assists, and 4th in rebounding. They were 1st in 3-point percentage, 1st in 3-pointers made, 1st in field goal percentage, 1st in field goals made. Like, this team just dominated everywhere. Like, I'm fairly convinced if there wasn't a wet spot on Houston's floor, this would probably be renowned as the greatest team of all time, especially because the KD Warriors probably don't happen if they win this year. But yeah, if you go back through this list and you look at individual players on these runner-up teams, none of them even had a season that touched Curry's in 2016. And they also had depth. They had Klay Thompson as well. Yeah, in terms of being on a runner-up list, I think they have kind of an unfair advantage. However, if you are wanting to convince me that the Spurs should have been the #1 team or somebody else should have been above the 16 Warriors, well, that's what the comment section is for. So make sure to leave that there if you have a dissent. Make sure to leave a like, also comment and sub if you enjoyed the video, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications the next time a video drops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.